Okay, so Pluto is now officially direct. And for us to truly understand what that means for us, we actually have to go back in time, all the way back to January of 2025. Pluto is at the exact degree that it is now, that what it was in January. So 1 degree of Aquarius. Now, what makes this a significant evolutionary turning point is not just Pluto being at the same place, but it's in fact that the nodes, the South Node and North Node, were also shifting from Aries Libra to Virgo Pisces. And that was within days. What that time meant for us is that we were seeking emotional clarity. But we were also coming out at the back of deciding for ourselves that we wanted stronger, real, authentic relationships with ourselves and with what we wanted with the world. We've arrived at the same place now. The only difference is we're not the same person. So before we jump into looking at the astrology charts and all of the key aspects that are associated with it, I think it's a good idea for us to first understand what Pluto represents. So Pluto, very simply, is an energetic principle that reveals to us what we hide away or we choose not to deal with because it's maybe too difficult, inconvenient, emotionally overwhelming, and oftentimes can also be incredibly emotionally vulnerable, sensitive, and deep. So we put it aside, just like Pluto right at the end of the solar system, away from the light, the sun, and we keep it there. So what Pluto does through an amplification process is it brings these themes to the surface for you to deal with, whether we like it or not. Oftentimes when they show up in our consciousness and our awareness, we get freaked out because we've hidden it for such a long time, it becomes a little bit confusing, weird, and strange to deal with. And we're scared of it. So when we have a Pluto direct or a Pluto retrograde moment, we're confronted with these hidden parts of ourselves that are brought to the surface. It's an invitation to heal, integrate, and reabsorb or understand what those themes are about within our lives. It's what truly matters. So Pluto went retrograde on the 4th of May, 2025, right? And what this moment in time represented to us was a subtle pressure that was coming through to the surface from beneath to say, whatever it was that you set in motion in January, now's the time to do the real work. So we circle back to whatever it is, our feelings, our insecurities, our trepidations, the places that felt like it lacked competence, whatever it was that wanted you to, where you wanted to be empowered when you made the decision in January, now you needed to work on that. So we went back all the way there and we said, okay, this is what we need to change. This is what we need to update. So now that we've arrived at the same place here that we did in January, but we've had a retrograde phase, we're not the same person because we've gone through 9 months of deep soul growth. Now, Pluto as an archetype in Aquarius represents the impulse, the desire to individuate, right? To break out of, to challenge the comfort zone and to say, this is no longer feels empowerment. This is no longer that feels good. And I want to challenge that, push that growth edge and grow over it so that you can experience something different in a new space. This is where we seek the truth of our lives beyond what is familiar. That's the potential. That's the opportunity. And sometimes that gets pushed onto us, and sometimes we take that through our own acceptance, right? Our own desire. Now, the question that Pluto in Aquarius is asking all of us is, what truths are you ready to live in a more authentic and honest way? Where are you still masking, hiding, or living in an outdated paradigm that no longer represents or reflects what's honest, true, and real for you? What's also fascinating about this transit, this Pluto direct, is that Jupiter is in an opposition to Pluto. And this Pluto direct energy actually speaks to an integration point of something that actually began way back in 2020 when Jupiter and Pluto made a conjunction. I'm going to talk more about that and what that looks like and why that's significant. But that's another Plutonian time loop that we've just gone through. Not only just going all the way back to January, but also the realization that whatever it was that we started to set intentions for way back in 2020 when Jupiter-Pluto conjunction happened in Capricorn, we're now at the halfway point and we're ready to step out and begin to live in this new way. So let's take a look at the actual charts themselves. I'm just going to kind of point things out for us. The first thing that we're going to take a look at is this chart over here. So this chart that you see on the screen, this is Pluto as it was when it was turning direct, right? 14th of October. And you can't see my cursor on the screen, unfortunately, but here are some interesting things to note. Pluto is in opposition to Jupiter, like I said. Pluto is at the 5 o'clock place. Jupiter is at the 11 o'clock place, okay, in the chart. Notice that the moon is conjunct Jupiter, all right? Notice that the sun sign is at 21 degrees Libra. Notice also that Neptune is sitting at 0 degrees of Aries. Uranus, right at the top at the 1 o'clock position, is sitting at 0 degrees of Gemini. And Venus is sitting at 0 degrees of Libra. These are all air signs. Well, not Neptune, sorry. But you've got air signs over here, Uranus in Gemini and Venus in Libra. And then you've got the cardinal sign of Neptune in Aries. They're all at 0 degree points. That's a convergence. That is an intersection between the old and the new. Again, right? Arriving at a place where we've been before, but now we're completely different. All right. This is the chart of January. I think it was like January the 11th or 12th or 10th, when Pluto was at the same degree that it is now, right? Notice that the sun is at 21 degrees, this time Capricorn. Notice that the south node is there at 0 degrees of Libra, and Venus is now there at that same point. So Venus today, or Venus when Pluto went direct, is at 0 degrees. Libra and the south node at the time, way back in January, is the same. Okay? What's also interesting here as well, again, the nodes shifting. Notice how the moon is conjunct Jupiter in January as well. Okay. If we go over to Pluto when it went retrograde in May, this is what it looked like. And again, we've got Moon-Mars opposition, Moon-Mars conjunction. No Jupiter conjunction though. But look, Mars is in its opposition to Pluto. In chart number 1, Mars is in opposition to Pluto. In chart number 3, we don't have Mars opposition, but we have Jupiter opposition. At every single point, there's always an opposition to Pluto. The first 2 charts was an initiation. The third one is an integration, right? So if we go back to over here, we can see that Venus, remember the planet Venus? It's at 2 degrees of Aries. That was when Pluto went retrograde in May. This is when Pluto went direct. Venus is in a direct opposition. It's the other side of Aries. So again, we're in this whole dynamic of polarity and balance and convergence between 2 points coming together and saying the old and the new. It's really fascinating. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take us on a little bit of a story arc, right? And walk us through the significance of all of these planetary archetypes. So let's start off by looking at how this story arc plays out for us, okay? The opening space is that Pluto is direct in Aquarius, right? That's where it is today. And Pluto represents to us this full circle moment where empowerment begins for us. That's the Pluto direct on the 14th of October. It represents a full circle and the beginning of empowerment for us. Then Pluto speaks to the return. And the return to what, right? Where have we been? Well, we've been here at this point in January. So the last time, as I said, Pluto was in Aquarius at 1 degree was in January, and the nodes have shifted. This was a turning point in our evolution. Okay? What did January invite for us? What did that return point invite for us? Well, it invited for us the need for emotional clarity. It invited the understanding that our values, our principles, our priorities in life, what was important, had also shifted. And it represented a moment of desire around authentic relationship empowerment. Why? Because when we came out of the 18-month cycle of the South and North Node in Libra Aries, we went through a deep metamorphosis around our life direction and the way that we wanted to live our lives. And was prompted to say, I want to take up space, Aries, in a completely new way in my life. I don't want to live this way anymore. Now, depending on what changes you wanted to make in your life at that time, they arrived at January. So when I say emotional clarity, what I mean here is that at the time we were seeking clarity, emotional clarity, to live in the way that we wanted to live in January, which was that decision to make to move in a new direction. We didn't know what it was or what it meant. We just knew that we couldn't do the old because we had changed within ourselves and that a new world was emerging for us. And we needed clarity on what that represented, what that meant. How can I take a step in a new direction if I don't know what it's about? That invited the reflection of realizing that our values and our principles and what we considered to be important, there was a mismatch between the world that we became familiar with and lived for such a long time and the world that we wanted to step into. They had different value structures, different priorities, different importances. And so that set in motion the need to clear out what was inauthentic in our lives so that we could live more in alignment with that authenticity. That's what it invited us, and that's what we return to today with that clarity. Now, along that road, when we asked these questions, we came into a Mars retrograde, a Venus retrograde that happened in the beginning of the year, and then we had a retrograde of Pluto itself there in May. And since May 2025, we were pressed with subtle emotional pressure from Pluto to say, what are the patterns within ourselves, emotional patterns, security patterns, habits, perspectives, internalized truths, belief systems that we hold that are still part of the old paradigm, the old way of doing things, the old story, the old direction. We needed to realize, and Pluto brought to the surface what needed to change. That's what I say when the work began. This was a deep realignment process. This was the moment where we began to realize what work we needed to do in order to gain that clarity that we seeked out way back in January. The retrograde journey brought us to where we are today. We've arrived at that same place that we were in January, but now we have some of that emotional clarity. Now we have some of those patterns within us that hold us back. Now we have some of the competence that we needed to gain in order for us to step into a new direction for us. It doesn't mean that it's in our lives. It means we know what we need to do going forward now. So today's moment, as Pluto goes direct, is we return back to that 1 degree mark, but you're not who you were in January. You have more clarity of that direction. And it's now time to live what you have learned and gained over the last 9 months. Okay, so let's take it a little bit further. The Pluto and Aquarius themes, as I talked about, were liberation, deconditioning, our personal truth over survival, and the question that should guide you throughout this whole entire Pluto Direct journey over the next couple of months is, what truth are you ready to live? That's a powerful question. What truth, Jupiter and Cancer, are you ready to live and emotionally empower? Pluto and Aquarius. That's the opposition. We're ready at that point. Now, the long-term story, okay? Pluto's Jupiter cycle. Why I think this is again significant is that, as I explained before with evolutionary astrology, we go, in order for us to track the planets and understand what they represent and what they mean, we go back to when the conjunction took place. That conjunction represented the desire to reorder and restructure one's life in a completely new way. We didn't understand it or know it at the time because we don't have that awareness. It was just seeded into our consciousness. And over the last 6 or 5 years, that discovery of what that conjunction has been about has been part of our lives. We've just arrived at the point now where we're ready to actually bring it out into the social context. We're out to bring it out of this deep internal reflection and into the social context. When it began in 2020, we all knew what we were going through within our lives at that stage. Our belief systems were restructured, and as I said, it's now time to externalize that truth. I'm going to break it down even further. But if we go ahead and take a look at today's chart, and we see what supporting cast is available for us to take that individuated truth and begin to live it in a completely new way, that's what this chart's potential has for us. So we'll go look at the opposition with Jupiter and the Moon in Cancer. We'll take a look at the trine with Venus in Libra and Uranus in Gemini, which I showed you, and the sextile with Neptune in Aries. Okay. There's the Uranus sitting at the 1 o'clock position, 0 degrees, the Neptune sextiling in Aries, and the Venus there in Libra. They're all 0 degrees. They're saying we're at that turning point. We're at that moment where the social construct, the social laws, the social rules, the social order needs to be updated in relation to what has changed under the hood in our lives. Internally, we have gone through changes. This moment signifies the expression of that, so that the feedback we get from the environment says, here's how we rebuild, restructure, reorder our lives based on this new set of belief systems, these new set of priorities, these new set of ways of thinking. So if we break it down even further, and we look at the Jupiter-Moon opposition, this is about embodying emotional truth. Embodying emotional truth means what is authentic, real, and honest for you. How can you try to align your reality, your set of belief systems, your orientation to the world that is deeply succinct with what is honest, true, and real for you? That's how you live a life that feels fulfilled, meaningful, and purposeful. It doesn't mean it's easy. It just means that that's what the prompt is about here with this opposition. So it says, yeah, stop rehearsing, live what you've learned, bring your beliefs to life. This is a moment of actualization. This is a moment of bringing yourself to the world. Whatever that is for you, that's what this energy prompts. That's what this energy gives permission to have come out. So what is it? What is your dreams? What do you want to ascertain? What do you want to pursue? How do you want to live? That's the promise with this opposition. As you do that, you will be confronted and given feedback from the environment that says what is aligned and what is not. If we take a look at the Venus trine Pluto aspect, we're looking at the relationship evolution. All dynamics fall away, new values and mutuality emerge. Meaning simply that this is the moment where you've looked at things that no longer are honest, true, and real for you, and you said, this takes up space, it takes up time, I don't have time for it anymore, and this is where I cut it. This is the social group, this is the community, these are the people, this is the association that I want to belong to, that represents, makes me feel alive, makes me feel inspired, makes me feel like I have value and meaning in my life. This is where I feel brought up, and so I want to align with that. That's where I'm going to take up that space. So new values help you align mutually with new people, with new experiences and new scenarios, and they naturally emerge as you give and take up space in that new way. But we're at that starting point. We're not at the point where it's already happened. You're at that starting point, and every day you make that conscious decision to live that embodied truth that Jupiter and the Moon is talking about. The next thing is Uranus is trine to Pluto, and how Uranus, through its revelation and acceleration, is completely shattering the paradigms of thinking that we once held a couple of years back. Just think about what life was like in 2020 and 2021, and think about what life is like now with the acceleration of Uranus and Gemini. It's completely reordering our entire way of thinking about things and what's possible and what's not. The truth changes as we connect. The truth changes in the way that we connect. This is about a reordering of language. This is about a reordering of the collective myth and the collective story that you say every single day to yourself, the way that you live your life. Whatever story you tell yourself every single day, I'm too overwhelmed, I'm disempowered, I'm too stuck. All of those things reinforce what you consistently believe about your life. Uranus and Gemini says, okay, well, if you're ready to keep those patterns looping, cool. But if you're ready to step out of that, I'll help you. Neptune sextile to Pluto, I wrote there spiritual rebirth. What I mean by that is each and every single one of us as human beings have the capacity to make meaning out of our lives, whether that be meaning through whatever you give it. We all are meaning-making machines. This is our system. What we give meaning to allows us to feel that there is something to wake up to every single day and live by. This Neptune in Aries is a prompt to say that there is a new, complete set of rules, laws, experiences, possibilities, potentials that live outside of that moment of crossing the threshold and looking over and saying, is this me? Beyond what I have always thought I am. Neptune is prompting that little subtle scent of possibility and potential to lure you into a new way of being. Aries, to take up space in a new way. But it will feel uncomfortable. It will feel uncertain. It will feel filled with anxiety. And that's literally because it's a completely new step, a new rebirth. We are on the precipice of something massive that is changing. And it's not something that is about to change. It's something that is in the motion of changing. It says instinctive meaning there. And what I mean by that is, again, we don't have the full scope. You don't know what this new path is about for yourself. But if it brings you excitement, it brings you alertness, it brings you attention, it brings you novelty, pursue it. Because that's what you've been doing since January. Figuring out what it means to live in a completely new way after you reordered yourself in the Libra Aries axis was changing your whole entire relationship to yourself. So, if we look at the Pluto checkpoints over here, I've got 3 of it for us. What began in January for you? Go back to January. What decisions and choices were you making in your life that felt that you needed to make it because it was a liberation? It was a freedom from the known and a step into the unknown. What were the decision choices that you were making? And let me know in the comment section, peeps. I'd love to know, right? What's shifted for you since then? Right? This whole arc that I've taken you on, what has shifted for you since then? Since January, what has shifted? And then finally, what truth am I ready to embody? What is the truth that you are ready to embody now? What have you discovered? What have you realized? What have you cleared out? What have you arrived to right now that you're ready to say, this is me, this is the new direction, and I'm ready to take up space in that new way? These are the checkpoints that if you integrate and let these questions guide you throughout this process, you will find clarity and understanding about how to take advantage of this Pluto Direct video. Okay? Cool. So, a few things to announce quickly before I jump off to this video. Share your reflections down in the comments section below, peeps. That's always highly appreciated. And for those of you that are ready to actually work with me on a deeper level, and you want to have support around what this Pluto Direct video, Pluto energy is about, there is a link down below, and you can schedule a free call with me, and we can discuss what it looks like to actually potentially work together at a deeper level, okay? So I'm going to leave that down in the description below. And as always, make sure that you share this video if you thought it had a lot of value. YouTube's integrated this new feature that's called Hype. If you feel that this is a video that's worth hyping, please click that. And until the next video, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.